Hello humans of the world, I'm Dawn of the World, welcome aboard. Let's jump right into the chapter, which is titled Adventure in the Land of Science. And we all kind of called that title, and it feels good because it means that we're going to be on this island for a decent amount of time. I'm thinking at least maybe a Zoe-ish lengthed arc. And while we're at it, why not take an adventure in the land of my subscribe button? You can stay tuned for the upcoming thrills and spills of this channel since I have finally, more or less, finished my course. So we pick up right where we left off with Vega Girl out here, and Frankie doesn't seem to think twice about her appearance. I just think it's because he's just so excited to meet, as he words it, his role model. He's so excited in the moment that such critical thinking hasn't really occurred to him yet. Or possibly it has, and explanations have already occurred for him likewise. Regardless, this chapter is absolutely filled with Frankie joy, and I can't get enough of it. I'm really excited for this arc. I'm loving Usopp's reaction here as well, and I love that his thoughts are pretty much right away that Luffy and Chopper have got to see this. That's happened a few times actually. I remember back in Dressrosa when Usopp was seeing the Tontatta's travel beetles and his first thoughts were that Luffy had to see it. And when Luffy was dressed from head to toe in armor at the Colosseum, he likewise wanted to show Usopp. They just have this really wholesome friendship. And then we have Sanji, who has no other functional logical choice but to simp. But I get it. And then we finally get Robin saying what we've all been thinking regarding Vegapunk's age and gender and how they don't seem to match what we've been told so far. Since before now, Vegapunk has only really been referred to in the context of being an old man, and we can't really go forward without acknowledging that. So we find out that this Vega Girl, otherwise known as Lilith, is Vegapunk but is not the main body. And that kind of in and of itself is what a lot of people were speculating last chapter. But jumping right ahead to the end of the chapter, I don't think many people were quite expecting Vegapunk to have divided himself up into 6 people, or rather 7, since I think the actual original body of Vegapunk is not Shaka, the number 1, and that Shaka is merely the first of the 6 alternative bodies, or rather satellites, that he's created. Basically, Vegapunk has so much knowledge, is so busy in his pursuits, that he could no longer contain this all in the one body, so he chose to create these 6 additional bodies in order to physically keep up with his own brain. It's pretty nifty. What I found really interesting is that Lilith describes Vegapunk's main or prime body as being the stellar body. I found this kind of interesting, seeing as stellar can mean star, and the word Vega is actually the name for the brightest star in the constellation of Lyra. Furthermore, as we've seen from last chapter, Vegapunk has some kind of logo of sorts going on. It's that military star kind of thing, like a large star with the 6 kind of lines or wings or whatever it is coming out of it. And I'm thinking possibly that star could represent the main stellar body of Vegapunk, while the 6 strokes coming off it are the 6 satellites. Also, going back to what I touched on last chapter, it's really interesting that Vegapunk has this star motif going on when the only other character I think of who also has a star motif and has had it since pre-time skip is Frankie. As for Lilith's namesake, Lilith is a figure who appears in a range of different texts. There's Jewish, Sumerian. There's quite a few different takes on her, the most common being that she was the first wife of Adam in the Garden of Eden prior to Eve, or also that she is some kind of female demon. I guess this new One Piece Lilith does have this kind of first woman denotation about her, since the 02 on her suit implies that she is the second satellite that Vegapunk created, and the first of those bodies that presents as a woman. We also see at the end of the chapter that each of Vegapunk's satellites represents a different trait. Why this is exactly, we don't really know yet, but Lilith apparently represents evil, which I guess lines up with her namesake in that most depictions she is interpreted as such. Lilith is also the name of a fictitious second hypothetical moon of Earth, which kind of keeps with the space theme. In fact, all of Vegapunk's satellites have namesakes that draw on either a mythical or historical figure that have also been namesakes for moons, craters, and other astronomical phenomena. We then get this part of her dialogue where Lilith implies that funds are tight. Whatever they're doing here in Egghead, it is not cheap, and they're having to scab and threaten for funds wherever they can. I'm in love with this Frankie here. He's really out here this chapter, like, don't threaten me with a good time. Meanwhile, Usopp's torn between fear and awe. I'm actually really enjoying what we're seeing of Lilith this chapter. She's part of Vegapunk, but she's impulsive, she's quick to frustration. She has has very little patience, and she seems to be the only satellite that we've encountered so far who speaks like a old man, as Vegapunk is said to be. What I find really interesting is that not only do the others not talk like that, but based on Lilith's conversation with Shaka, they seem to be on really different wavelengths. Like, they seem to be different people despite technically being a part of the same person. So it's becoming pretty clear to me that these satellite Vegapunks, they're not a hive mind, and they seem to have very distinct and separate personalities. It seems almost like Vegapunk has divided different parts of his personality into the different satellites. But I guess at some point in the arc we're going to get a bit more of an explanation. Man, One Piece is becoming like a full-blown sci-fi now. So Shaka seems to be a lot more collected. He thinks things through a lot more than what Lilith seems to do. And on top of this, he's also able to get through to her using his logic. Logic also being the trait that he represents. That being said, while he doesn't exactly go sleeping on Zoro nor Robin's abilities, I kind of feel like he could have been overlooking everyone else, since everybody else was either off ship or caught up in the shenanigans as they do. I love the added touch here of Nami clinging to Robin, and I love how Robin seems to be taken very seriously these days. Like, she's almost up there with the monster trio / quartet now that Jinbei's in the mix. Also, I think I already said this, but I love all the Frankie faces this chapter. Look at that wonderful man. So I have a question now, because I might have overlooked this, but do we know what Zoro wants from Vegapunk? Is it meant to be obvious? Because I don't really know. I feel like it's not meant to be obvious. And the fact that he seems to be inquiring on behalf of himself rather than on behalf of the crew is pretty interesting as well. Like, could it have something to do with one of the unresolved plot points in Wano? Could Zoro want to turn one of his swords into a fruit user? Because I really can't see that being the case. It seems as though Vegapunk also has some kind of interest in the crew, probably for a few reasons. I'm gonna guess that there's some interest in Frankie, and also very likely some interest in Sanji because of the whole Germa thing. And here we see Shaka, and all we see is that he's masked and has his back turned. Why don't we see his face? Anyway, off with the rest of the squad. Bonnie and Kuma's connection has finally been revealed, and that is that they're father and daughter. I mean, I'd considered a lot of things, but I hadn't personally guessed this one, but that's cool. So this confirms that Bonnie is the 22 years old as she appears in her default appearance, and she's not just some old woman running around in a disguise. And it also makes her another One Piece princess, since her father was the king of Sorbet Kingdom. So I guess that from what we've learnt now, Bonnie spent a fair amount of her childhood in the New World, despite the fact Sorbet Kingdom is in South Blue. Kuma obviously had a lot of business with Vegapunk, business that obviously led to him becoming the cyborg that he now is. And this seems to possibly have been during the era that Kuma was with the Revolutionaries as well. I'm not too sure on like the time frames here. I'd have to look into it again if it has been explained at some point. So with this in mind, I wonder if Vegapunk has had any business with the Revolutionary Army, and if Bonnie was involved with them too, for that matter, in any kind of way. And now there's suddenly this connection between Luffy and Bonnie that we never realized before. Because not only do they both like food, but their dads are old war buddies. And on the topic of South Blue, I can't help but again wonder if there's gonna be any Frankie significance. I'm just gonna see Frankie connections all around right now. Mostly I say this because Frankie was born in South Blue before he entered the Grand Line at no older than 4. That's kind of all we know. If there is gonna be more to it though, we should be finding out this arc, but no promises. Anyway, I liked this background detail of Jinbei helping Bonnie up into the lab, and I really think this following panel is definitely worth remembering. We have Bonnie remembering the fact she met Sabo at Marijois, but deciding not to reveal the fact until later. She says that she ran into him, implying that they might have interacted, might have had a bit of a run-in. They may have been involved in each other's escape, they were there for similar reasons. And now I wonder, among other things, if Bonnie also knows about Im, and if she does know about Im, she could be the means through which the Straw Hats find out. Anyway, my guess as to why she's here now is that she allowed the Revolutionaries to take Kuma because she knew that they could be trusted with him, and now she's come to Egghead to talk Vegapunk into turning him back, or to see if that's even possible. Also, I reckon that this hologram technology is definitely going to be significant later on. We'll see things that aren't actually there, and it'll have bigger repercussions than it just not being a giant robot or a space monster or food. And this little part here was just to introduce us to these holograms, to show us that they are a thing, to give us a bit of an idea of the mechanics as to how they work. Also, I had a bit of a laugh at Luffy kind of going gear 5th in rage. Anyway, we get another Vegapunk satellite named Atlas, who resembles a Kaido-sized little girl. It's full of rage and confirms that the island is initially a winter island, but has an artificial climate. At the same time, we encounter this food machine of everyone's children's dreams, and it seems to have the 4 cardinal directions on it, also being the names of the 4 blues. This makes me think that the raw ingredients that Atlas speaks of are from all 4 blues, so food from all of these oceans could be made. Kinda wonder what Sanji would think of this. But what I find most interesting is the food that comes out. A hamburger with chips and a Vegapunk cola. Now we all know that, again, Frankie may be significant this arc, and that he is powered by cola, but also, as confirmed in an SBS, his favourite food is a hamburger. So it's really quite interesting that that seems to be the food that has appeared here in the lab. Also note how this Vegapunk star is present on the cola and the chips. So now we have the most Frankie meal here present in Vegapunk's lab. And I know that some people have speculated for a while that Vegapunk could be Frankie's dad, as in one of the parents who abandoned him in Water 7, and I've never subscribed to that, and I still don't think that. But this meal is really making me think now that there could be some level of connection, because this could have been any meal, but Oda has chosen to make it the most Frankie meal that he possibly could. Why? And don't go telling me that it's not that deep. Anyway, Luffy and Bonnie are having the best time, and it's really nice to see Luffy hitting it off with somebody like this. We have them toasting a little later on too. He's met his match, and it's really cool to see him developing a friendship with somebody who is not only one of his fellow supernovas, but also the child of his dad's friend. Anyway, Atlas goes on a bit of a rant as to how the machine works. It even has a make the most of what you've got mode. I need that. But the main thing that strikes me is that she laments endless ideas, not enough resources, which kind of follows up from earlier in the chapter when Lilith was commanding the others to relinquish their valuables, since research funds were scarce. So underfunding is gonna be a thing this arc. Vegapunk's 6 satellites seem to be a relatively new development, since Bonnie interprets Atlas's claim to be Vegapunk as a lie. Obviously, when she was a child, she encountered the stellar body, or rather the original Vegapunk, who might still be somewhere deep in this lab. We haven't really been given a hint as to where he is at the moment. Anyway, I hope we're all ready for a blast from the past, because it seems like Lucci and Kaku are going to be back on the scene sometime soon, due to the fact that the world government, whom the Vegapunks have been working under for all this time, now want the Vegapunks gone, but their work kept. Even Lucci is questioning this and wondering if it has anything to do with Lucia, but is being warned not to do so by his colleagues, lest he invoke the wrath of the world government, because no one wants that. Let me know you guys' thoughts. I'm probably going to keep doing my chapter reviews like this, where I comment a lot more on what's happened rather than moving entirely into speculative territory, since I got a lot of positive feedback for this from you guys last chapter. Also, yes, I really do need to focus on getting some videos stockpiled in advance. Anyway, my camera is once again out of memory. I really need to clean it out. I have some more videos coming out. I'm working towards a more regular release schedule, so look forward to that. I'm Dawn of the World, and I will see you next time. Later, guys.